Before I tested positive, my first partner and my best friend were two of the first people in the United States to be admitted to San Francisco General Hospital. One had KS, which is a rare form of cancer, and my partner had PCP, which is a rare form of pneumonia. At that time, when people would be diagnosed, they were thrown into quarantine. And nothing is harder than when someone you're close to or someone you love is placed into quarantine and you're not allowed to visit. And I thought I had just got a bad cold because I was run down. When my friends finally took me to the hospital, it turned out I had PCP. Now, if you think it's hard to watch someone die in quarantine, when you're put into quarantine yourself and you're told you're going to die and you're not allowed any visitors, I don't think there's anything scarier. There has always been stigma. Having dealt with this since the very beginning, there was even stigma and discrimination from other gay men. I think where we don't have as much stigma and discrimination within the gay community, there is still some. I think the communities that now have to deal with it the most are minorities and women. Because in those two communities, people unfortunately still like to think this is a gay disease, which has never just been a gay disease. This is a virus. A virus doesn't care what your sexuality is. It doesn't care what race you are, how much money you make, where you live. It can infect anyone. So to think that it can't happen to you, or that it's no big deal, because unfortunately in some of our schools, children are being told this is like having diabetes, all you have to do is take a pill. Nothing could be further from the truth. As a long-term survivor of HIV and AIDS, besides the medications that I have to take to combat the HIV, there's other problems that come along. Part of it's from aging, a lot of it's from previous HIV medications and the HIV virus itself. I have to combat chronic wasting, HIV wasting. So there's a couple medications I have to take for that. I have to take heart medication because of a heart attack and stroke. I also have to take a pill to help me sleep because of the side effects from the medication. And there's 3 other medications that I take because of side effects from the HIV medications. The most important thing for me to say to people is always use protection and to get tested regularly. The tests that we have now can test if you've been exposed in the last 3 months. So I tell people, even if they think they're in a monogamous relationship, to get tested at least twice a year, because the sooner you find out, number one, the less the side effects will be from the medication. And secondly, you don't want your immune system to become so compromised that the medications can't help. In 1985, because I was already out as an activist, a friend of mine from the Department of Children and Family Services in California contacted me because there was a little girl named Candace. Her mother had been a prostitute and had passed away a few days after giving childbirth, and they had no idea who the father was. Now, Candace was also born with the alcohol fetal syndrome, so she was deformed. Her little mouth was on the side, her ear was miniature sized and on her cheek, and she had other internal problems. When I went into San Francisco General Hospital and saw this little infant child, and she was small for her size, she was in an incubator. Even the nurses weren't paying attention to this child. At this time in '85, I was 23 years old. By this time, I'd probably lost about 300 friends to HIV and AIDS. And I'd watched most of these people die in quarantine. Looking at this little girl who had done nothing wrong except be born, being ignored, basically being left to die. There was no way that I couldn't do whatever I could. Now, being a gay man, I could not legally adopt her even in San Francisco. So I became a godparent. I think the forms actually said foster parent. And my second partner, who was alive at the time, and I took her home. They only expected Candace to live about 6 months. Brad and I had no idea how long we were going to live because we had both been positive for a few years. We had help from our female friends, from our male friends to take care of her when we had to work. So it was really a community effort. Now, although they only expected Candace to live 6 months or less, she ended up living to be age 4.5. And as hard as it is to lose your friends when they're adults, I never really understood when I heard people say a child should never die before their parent until it happens to you. When Candace went into the hospital for the last time, I was up there for 11 days straight because we never knew from one day to the next which would be the last. And I remember the last day, she looked up at me because it was August and Christmas was her favorite event of the year. And I would save all year long for her Christmas presents. And she said, "Dad," because she couldn't say the word dad because of her mouth, "would you make other children like me feel loved?" And I promised her I would. And she's the whole reason I started doing Christmas parties for kids with HIV. And 23 years later, I'm still doing them. Now we do multiple cities in the US and 12 foreign countries. And we try to help about 200,000 kids a year. Life is not a dress rehearsal. If you love someone, tell them. If there's something you believe in doing, do it. If there's something you want out of life, go and get it.